Well, he's still here with us in the studio, and we'll just put the question right to him. You have heard him say it. He says, first of all, growth is not inclusive, and that there are so many things that, policy can handle. Why, for instance, is the federal government reluctant to privatize the refineries?
Okay, so two quick things. Number one, talking about inclusivity. Now, so we believe that the private sector will drive growth, will drive development ultimately, and that is why we are working very closely and very actively with the private sector. Now, while that happens, we believe that government ought to make some interventions, and that is why we have the social investment program, where right now we have about 200,000 unemployed Nigerian graduates that are working, and they are making contributions, and they are getting paid, and they will be there for 2 years. That is why we have the conditional cash transfer, where we are giving almost 200,000 very poor Nigerians 5,000 naira every month. That is why we have the homegrown school feeding that is currently feeding about 7 million pupils in about 20 to 22 states. So we have these programs as a stopgap. Why we get to the point that we can grow and develop and create jobs, government is doing something in the interim. That's one. Now, talking about the policy, as Mr. Muda Yusuf himself, we attest, we engage with the private sector at different levels. We engage with them on the quarterly business forum. They come to an open forum with the vice president, presiding members of the economic management team, all the ministers, private sector chieftains sit around the table and address these issues and come up with solutions. And government with them go ahead to pursue the solution. That is why we are able to make this improvement and this reform success in the ease of doing business, where the World Bank said that not only have we improved in the ease of doing business ranking, but that we are among the 10 most reformed economies in the world. The World Bank said this. It's a result of the collaboration, the active, diligent collaboration between the federal government and the private sector. So we have different levels. We have the Industrial Competitiveness Council, where you have people like Dangote, Mr. Peter Side, and several other active players.
So if we're willing, sorry to interrupt, if we're willing then to embrace wholeheartedly the ratings and the rankings of the World Bank, especially as regards to the efforts we've made with regards to the ease of doing business, why are we then looking, looking not so critically at this report of the IMF saying that Nigerians, despite all the things that you have mentioned, despite the growth that we seem to be recording in the economy, are getting poorer?
Well, that's what I said, that while we're working out the issues with the private sector, because we believe that the private sector has to be encouraged to drive the growth, to drive the development, as it were. Yeah. That's our position. We strongly believe that. Well, now, we're saying in the interim, government can do this, and that's why we have the social investment program, so that government can take care of issues right now while we get to that point. And like I said, there's a very robust engagement with the private sector under this government.
Nigerian economic historians may recall in the mid to late 80s into the 90s, up to probably the early 2000s, we had some level of structural adjustment programming. We know that inflation increased. We know that according to the dictates of the IMF, the value of the naira fell. We know that several things happened. Now, I want to ask you, in 2015, when the economy was facing a meltdown, and the IMF essentially told President Buhari to essentially let the naira fall into a free fall, and he said no, that it needs to be tagged, that it needs to be controlled. Well, what do you think ultimately that would mean if we had obeyed IMF directives in terms of how the economy should have been managed in view of the history?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much. That's a very important perspective. And our position is that, look, we do understand and appreciate the involvement, the engagement, the Council of International Agencies. They clearly have a role to play. But ultimately, the decision, about what happens in Nigeria, about the direction of our economy, is our own decision to take. And so we listen to the Council, but ultimately, Nigerians are going to hold the president and this government responsible for what happens. So, yeah, we have to take our own decisions after we have reviewed the situation very well. And like I said, one thing that Nigerians appreciate about this government is that not only is the president committed, that the president has no behind-the-scenes deals. He's not a guy that calls deals. He's very honest. and he wants to ensure that this country gets on the right track economically, and that is why there is this
Mr.
trust.
Laolu, I'm going to pop in one quick question because you haven't quite answered the question on policy. Why are you reluctant? Why is the government reluctant to privatize the refineries? We've also heard from the Minister of Finance that the NNPC is currently under recovering, even though the government claims that there is no subsidies on petrol. We all know that the reverse is the case if the NNPC is under recovering, as you put it.
Well, so I have to take those questions one by one. Why is government reluctant to privatize? I don't think you can say that it is a question of reluctance. We are taking our time. I have told you that our own view, this government view, is that this economy has to be private sector led. So in terms of the principle, it's very clear that that is the approach that we believe ought to take place, and that is what is going to happen. But if we have not done it now, it doesn't mean that we don't believe that the economy has to be private sector led. The Minister for Petroleum
so in other words,
can give you details about what is happening right now. But in terms of the principle, we are very clear that it has to be private sector led.
Well, so in other words, you're not still very clear as to why the NNPC is under recovering.
Okay, so let me explain that. So we have a situation where there are issues around pricing, around the cost, because the price of oil has gone up. That also affects the cost of doing the business, and so oil marketers are saying that, well, we cannot do business.
So would there be full
cost.
deregulation? I think that's the question I'm asking.
No, well, I'm trying to explain to you what is happening.
We are totally out of
right
time, and for a lot of people, that's what it boils down to. Would there be full deregulation?
Well, we all options are open, and we will find out what happens. But the president is rather more interested in protecting the consumers rather than subsidizing people who are doing all kinds of business under very shady deals. He would rather protect the consumers, the end users.
Well, Mr. Laolu Akande is the Senior Special Assistant to the President in the Office on Media and Publicity in the Office of the Vice President. Thank you for coming on Sunrise today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the program continues with Chairman Ngimba in Lagos.